My name is Terek, and today I'll be talking to you about how thinking like an editor can help you be a better product manager. So if you want to reach me for questions or comments, feel free to message me on LinkedIn or Twitter. Just some quick disclaimers before we get started. All the content in the slides are my personal thoughts and opinions and do not represent any of my current or prior employers. Uh, Part of this talk was inspired by Shani Raja, who was a senior editor at the Wall Street Journal. It's through listening to some of his talks I became to internalize the idea of how thinking the mindset of an editor can actually help me be a better product manager. So just a quick intro. I currently work on the AR team at Google as a product manager. I previously worked at North, the smart glasses company, where we built a fashionable everyday pair of smart glasses. During my time there, I worked on a variety of things, both on the consumer side as well as on the platform. This included things like the system UI, the interaction model, core experiences such as the weather, calendar, and notifications, as well as some of our hero experiences related to navigation and exploration. So that's helping you see what's around you, or turn-by-turn navigation, or Uber and transit. And then I also focused on platform efforts with the following generation of our Focals product. To start introducing the editor mindset for a product manager, I want to talk about editors and how they have similarities in the way they approach their job between them and what product managers do. When we think about publications such as the New York Times, The Economist, or the Wall Street Journal, we often think about the editors who have helped curate all this writing that come from a variety of different types of authors. And the interesting thing to think about when thinking about good editors is that they tend to curate content, ideas, and opinions that come from different people. They try to ensure a cohesive editorial message. In a certain way, when you read a newspaper or a publication, some of them are reporting on facts, but at times there is an inherent opinion, an inherent take, a mental model of how you see the world that's being communicated in the writing. There's a certain element of trust that readers put in those publications to give them thoughtful analysis on the events and then tying different events together. A lot of editors do that by empathizing with their readers, by ensuring that the views and the mental models they're using do not leave their readers confused, but actually help them better understand certain topics or ideas. They also focus on publishing awesome content, similar to how product managers focus on publishing amazing products, and they think about their readers and their writers. Comparing that to product managers, similarly, we also curate ideas and opinions. These ideas and opinions come from our teammates, from our customers, from our understanding of the outside competition. We use all that information to communicate a shared vision, which is inherently our own interpretation as a company of why we're doing certain things and how we think about problems that our users face. At the same time, we also have to keep in mind multiple stakeholders, including our users and our teams and other groups of stakeholders. Ultimately, there's a lot of similarities in between shipping a good product and having a good publication. They differ in a lot of areas, of course, but these are just some of the similarities that I found to be helpful in developing this idea of an editor mindset. The editor mindset is essentially a framing about a group of skill sets. It's about how we can approach project management with a lens of how an editor would. And ultimately, it's centered around two key ideas. The first one being the thoughtful curation of ideas and opinions. As product managers, we're constantly interacting with other people in the organization, customers, feedback from the outside world. So this is about curating, fostering, and understanding the why behind those ideas. And the second part of this mindset is aiming to be an elite written communicator. And using the word elite here was done on purpose to emphasize the importance of what we write and how we write it and how we make it easy to understand and follow by everyone. So I'll dig a little bit deeper into each one of those 2 points and describe how when you embrace an editor mindset, your thinking about those things changes. So starting off with the thoughtful curation of ideas and opinions, apparent behaviors that start to change when you embrace the thoughtful curation of ideas and opinions when interacting with others is that you're listening more. You're not just listening for the sake of listening, but you're actually taking an active role in digging in and understanding the ideas that whether it's your teammates, your customers, or your competitors are thinking about, and even trying to understand what might be the inherent drivers for those perspectives and ideas. And those can eventually come to shape your own thinking and your own perspective. But the first step is listening, and listening in a way that is actually proactive. Another thing that happens when you're going through this process is that you're asking questions. You're asking questions to uncover blind spots in your thinking, to develop a new vantage point of how to look at things differently from talking to people. So when you're talking to everyone, you're also trying to facilitate a discussion. Facilitating the discussion is about ensuring diverse and minority opinions get shared and examined, and the underlying reasons for those opinions is looked at. It's also about introducing guardrails to try to drive a focused and productive discussion when having these sessions with other people, such that you can arrive at something that helps develop a shared understanding. You also find yourself creating space for alternative points of view. When thinking about a point of view, this can change depending on how far along you are in the process of developing a shared perspective. And the key idea here is that usually it gets harder to accept different types of opinions or points of views as you get closer to the end of the process, or even once a shared perspective has been established, and accepting new ideas that challenge that shared perspective. Those are important things that you start doing when you're embracing this approach to thinking about how to curate ideas. And ultimately what you end up doing is driving towards a shared perspective. And a shared perspective here is not necessarily consensus, but a process by which people feel that they were involved, that their thoughts were genuinely considered and incorporated where it made sense into the process. The second part of the editor mindset is about elite written communication. In certain ways, written communication has become even more important in our new remote work reality. The use of the word elite here is meant to highlight the focus on creating high quality writing when communicating with others as a product manager. When thinking of yourself as someone who embraces elite writing, your approach to how you communicate with others in a written form will change. You'll find that you're writing with purpose, that your writing is trying to drive to a certain outcome. You'll find that your writing becomes more simple and easy to understand. And that doesn't necessarily mean that the concepts or the ideas that are being shared are simple, but that the writing doesn't get in the way, but in fact help make those ideas or those concepts easier to grasp by people. Another thing you'll find is that your thoughts are clear and unambiguous, so that if people are reading your writing, they don't feel like they are having to read it multiple times to understand what is happening, but in fact the way things are written is actually helping them grasp what might be actually a very complex idea. Your writing will also start to feel more structured, and it will flow more naturally. Templates in our profession are taken a little bit too seriously in certain aspects. They are good to ensure that there's consistency. They're good to ensure that people are answering or have the appropriate content that the team needs. But something to be thinking about as an editor is that templates serve a purpose, but you have to be thoughtful about why are you writing what you're writing. You have to be thinking about what is it that you're trying to get across, and use the structure and the layout of your communication to help make that happen, and not always focus on ensuring using a certain template that might not necessarily make a lot of sense in a particular situation. Another thing that you will find yourself doing is that your writing will become more stimulating and interesting to read. The way that happens is by thinking about the fact that you're not just writing, but you're actually sharing a narrative and telling a story and getting everyone to follow along. And that requires you to use a certain tone. That requires you to make sure that there's a certain element of style and flow into your writing. Keeping those things in mind, this will help others better understand how your point of view has actually also incorporated a lot of the stuff that we talked about from before, from the thoughtful curation of ideas. This all sounds logical, but it's actually hard. The reason why is because the editor mindset promotes skills that you might not naturally be good at, and it requires a lot of self-awareness and practice. The reason being is that proactive listening is about listening to others as if you were an investigator. It's not just listening, it's not just active listening, it's proactive listening. It's taking on an active role in understanding what other people are saying, and that looks at understanding, like, why are people saying what they're saying, what are their intrinsic motivation, what is it that's getting them to say what they're saying. And that is a very taxing thing to do, and it can be quite exhausting and a bit unnatural at times. The second part of this that makes this difficult is the importance of nonverbal communication. When curating opinions and ideas, it requires a lot of discussions, a lot of brainstorming sessions, one-on-ones, presentations. All those forms are opportunities for us to convey ourselves in a certain way, whether it's in the tone of voice we use or our gestures or our body language. Those things are things that we don't naturally pay attention to, but can impact how others react to the situation in which we're soliciting their opinions or sharing ideas and thoughts. The third thing that makes this a little bit hard is that good writing is not something that we strongly focus on, particularly for product managers who come from a STEM background like myself. I went to engineering school, so good writing wasn't exactly one of the most heavily focused on areas in university, and that kind of carries through in as we go into the real world. And it requires a lot of practice. It requires a lot of attention to try to think about why those are certain things that you might want to pay attention to and develop. What I want to mention now in terms of parting thoughts is that in order to get better at this, I would say you have to practice. You have to reflect every time you practice on how you can do better, and you have to heighten your awareness of how you're curating and discussions, of how your communications, whether it's nonverbal or written, is being received, and iterate to try to get better. I hope you found this to be helpful. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to reach to me on LinkedIn or Twitter, and I'd be happy to answer your questions.